Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all of you here. I am Sharon Steckman, the ranking member of Education in the House, and with me is Senator Quirmbach, the chair of Education in the Senate. And we have we sent a survey out middle of last week to all superintendents, asking them what they felt, how this 0% or 4% allowable growth, how it would affect their districts, and just their views on it. It was amazing what we received back. 87% of the superintendents responded in that short period. The turnaround time was not that quick, or it was that quick, and we had 87% responded. Huge list of schools that came back and gave us their views on it. It's actually very close to their heart, of course, because they are the ones that oversee the teachers, the parents, the kids, everything about that school system, and they really know what they need. The local education leaders warned that they will soon be forced to assume that there may be no increase in funding. I don't know if you want to add some more to that.
Well, sure. This is a matter that we should have taken care of last year. As I think most of you know, allowable growth is supposed to be set a year and a half in advance to give schools fair warning about how much money they're going to have to spend so that they can use the taxpayers' dollars most efficiently and most effectively. The Iowa superintendents have spoken loud and clear. Iowa schools cannot wait any longer for the legislature and the governor to work together to fulfill our statutory obligation to do what's best for our local schools. This week, the Senate will approve a 4% increase in state funding, in other words, 4% allowable growth, with additional state funds to prevent any increase in property tax related to this measure. I'm encouraging our colleagues in the House, and I know Sharon will work very hard, to move likewise to take speedy and appropriate action.
It's our goal to have world-class schools, and we can't shortchange our schools, and that's what we've done. We should have, as Senator Quirmbach said, we should have passed this last year. A month after the governor presents his budget, by law, we are supposed to do that. They did that in the Senate. We tried to bring it up in the House, and it was defeated each time we brought it up. So superintendents realize that we need schools with 21st century learning, and I hope the Republicans and the governors will listen to what our school superintendents said. I have a couple of quotes here that I thought were especially good. Please understand that our 0% allowable growth, with 0% allowable growth, our budget guarantee will be higher, which means an increase of property taxes for our patrons. Another superintendent said, we did our part to get leaner in the tough times. Now it is time to return to a more typical funding levels as the state is demonstrating recovery. And I think this was heard throughout the entire, you can actually go to the website and find all the comments by all the different superintendents from the different school districts talking about the issues that will impact these schools. Larger class, my district in particular, larger class sizes, letting go of teachers, letting go of teacher associates, doing away with programs, doing away with counselors, nurses, all those things that make for a world-class educational system, which is what we need.
In our survey, we asked the superintendents what was the last date by which they could possibly accommodate an allowable growth number for next year without having to assume that it was going to be 0. More than half said February 15th. 88% said they have to know by March 1, or they were going to have to start making plans for laying off teachers and canceling textbook orders and otherwise cutting their budgets next year in a way that I believe will ultimately hurt student achievement. So we need to move on this year's allowable growth right now. We also are obligated by statute to pass within the first 30 days an allowable growth figure for the school year on beyond, for the 2014-15 school year. And I am very, very much dedicated to getting back on that schedule. The Senate will consider an allowable growth bill for the following school year within that time frame. We have not yet chosen a number, but we will definitely meet our statutory responsibility. And again, I know Sharon will work hard in the House to move the measure through in that chamber as well.
And I'll just repeat, you can go online to find the survey that we actually sent out to the superintendents and all their responses. It's all there. So, are there any questions?
Will the Senate end the forward funding law?
No. I firmly believe that the forward funding law, you're referring to setting the allowable growth number a year and a half in advance. I firmly believe that that is an intelligent way to set school funding so that, like I say, so that local school officials can get maximum use out of the local property tax dollars and out of the state dollars that we give them as well. You know, that law, that part of the allowable growth policy was set in a bill that was passed in 1995, and it was signed by, wait for it, Governor Branstad. So I think that if the governor would live up to the law that he signed, that would be most welcome news to our local school districts.
I don't remember when you did this, but you've done a survey before. What was the outcome when you did the survey before?
I think we can probably look that up. I don't have that information right at hand, but you know, this is really quite an unprecedented situation. We need this number to be decided on now for the coming school year.
So by law, we should have done it, like I said, last year, a month after the governor presents his bill. This is like a family deciding they're going to buy a house and not knowing what their income is going to be. I mean, you can't make those important decisions. You can't do your bargaining with for teacher salaries. You can't decide on what programs you're going to have. You can't decide on your class size if you have no idea what your funds will be. And this is the position we have put our school districts in, our parents, our teachers, our kids. And it's inexcusable. It's literally inexcusable. We should have done it last year. So I'm hoping we act on it as soon as possible. The reform bill, we are having a subcommittee again tonight at 5 in the House. We are working together, trying to come up with some things that we can all agree on in the reform bill. But they need to know about their money before that.
And I'll add to that, the Senate as well is moving forward with its consideration of the governor's reform proposal. We will have Director Glass, Education Department Director Jason Glass, in this room on Wednesday for the Education Committee meeting so that he can present his proposal along with some of the task force members who helped to develop those proposals. He can make that pitch to the whole committee. We are scheduling on into next week additional speakers to give us additional perspective on this. It's an interesting proposal. I think there are a number of constructive ideas in there, but it's something that we need to consider carefully and fully before putting it into law. The urgency right now is with allowable growth. We need to get that done now.
Given both of your backgrounds in education, though, just talking about some of the proposal from the Department of Education, some of us were at that meeting this morning, talking about the mentoring and the leadership pathways, and your take on both of that, having some teachers who would be mentors to other teachers, and that's what we're talking about.
Well, we actually have that in code right now. I believe it was before I was in the House, but in 2001, I believe, they passed a career ladder, very similar, but it was never funded. And so my worry would be, if we pass something like this, are we going to fund it? So those would be the issues that I would look at.
And I would add, last year's education bill that got bipartisan support in the Senate, passed the Republican-controlled House, the governor signed it, had some of the same type of elements in it. We increased the required hours per year for professional development to 36. We, in the original version in the Senate at least, we had a provision in there, a section in there, due to Senator Bowman, for coaching, of teachers coaching other teachers. Well, mentoring, coaching, use whatever phrase you want. It's an opportunity and resources for teachers to work on developing their craft, increasing their skills, and adopting modern teaching methods. That's very much the theme of at least some sections of the governor's bill. That's why I'm optimistic about doing good work there. But again, we need to pass allowable growth now. We have to keep the lights on and the gas in the bus and ordering pencils and all of that stuff that schools have to do. We will move forward with education reform. We can work on both things at the same time.
The way the governor's office says they're structuring the reform plan of funding is that it's again on a per student basis. So districts get $300 a change per student. But this means that districts that say already have the minimum salaries that they're looking to raise them to get more flexibility with the money, whereas districts that don't pay $35,000 a year are going to have to pump most of that money into the salaries potentially. I guess I'm wondering if you think that this will provide parity because it's a per student allocation, or is there potential that richer districts get richer and poor districts still are lagging behind?
Well, I think that that's exactly the kind of issue that we need to study carefully, and why it will take a bit longer to work through ed reform. The system we have right now for funding schools, in the main, it is based on a per pupil expenditure level. And that's why Iowa is one of the few states that hasn't been sued on an equal protection basis. But we're going to be addressing the property tax inequities in our companion bill that will, among other things, prevent any property tax increase from being caused by our allowable growth. So we can pass allowable growth, and we need to do that now, and we're going to also move on a bill that will protect property taxpayers.
It doesn't sound like you're optimistic of meeting the governor's timetable of wrapping up the reform bill by the end of February.
We will do due diligence on that. The House is moving forward with their subcommittee meetings. We're bringing speakers into the full education committee here, and we'll probably begin our own subcommittee meetings later this week. I'm not going to put a deadline on that other than obviously we have first funnel we have to meet to get a bill out of committee.
At the same time, you just gave us the survey, and the farther you get into March, they've indicated that's when they're going to start setting up things slips, that's when they're going to cancel.
We have to do the funding before anything else. That districts, you'll be able to see by the survey, that is a priority. We need to do that separate from the reform. That just has to be done for districts. We can't leave them hanging. Pardon me?
I said 1/4 of the vote is represented here. If you don't do that right away and don't meet the February deadline the governor said, it looks like you're headed towards a situation where school districts get sort of caught in the middle of this.
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to avoid.
Yes.
That's exactly what we're trying to avoid with doing this survey, getting the information out. I really hope that our legislative colleagues, each and every one of them in the Senate, will take a look at this survey and take a look at the responses from their own individual districts before they vote on Wednesday. I think that if they look at the strong support for allowable growth, for 4% allowable growth, that come from their home school districts, I think that this matter should pass the Senate with bipartisan support.
And I think it would encourage the House Republicans to look at it and say, oh, my district needs these funds to proceed.
I want to know whether the plan laid out what Jason was to us earlier today, that there's stipends and the minimum teacher salary goes up, there's stipends for those in the ladder. Is there sort of a natural domino upward effect on salaries if minimum pay is going up and other people are leaving the classroom to do this extra work? Somebody's going to have to do it, and
Exactly.
how much?
Those are all things.
Is that even going to cover what you have to do?
Those are all things we need to look at. And if you look in the survey, we have asked about the 2015 budget, and you'll get some of the responses from superintendents there.
Yeah, you're asking this exactly the same kind of questions that we're going to have to be asking Jason Glass, but also local superintendents and representatives of the other stakeholders that we're going to have coming in. The governor's plan is, as I understand it, proposed to be phased in over 5 years. So we have some time frame there to work out some of those details, and we want to make sure we get those details right. But again, to come back to the main point today, we've got to get allowable growth for next school year done now. When
we did the budget cuts, when we were in a little bit of a recession, school districts have cut as much as they can, and they're asking us now, okay, fund us. We need to be funded. So Thank you very much for coming. Oh, you had a question, I'm sorry.
Okay, so you passed this bill on Wednesday, it goes over the House. So what's going to happen? What's your expectation of what's going to happen in the House? If they're just going to sit on it until education reform is passed?
I will get up on the floor and call for it to be voted on if they don't bring it up.
And how can you do that?
I did that twice last year. Suspension of rules and asked for the bill to be brought up and voted on. And twice it was defeated. But I'll do that again this year as many times as it takes because education is important to all of us in Iowa and this needs to be done.
When are you going to do that?
Well, we're waiting on the Senate first.
Okay, but you'll do that like on Thursday?
We'll see what the House does. If they decide they want to bring it up, which would be wonderful, which would be good for all of Iowa, the kids, the schools, then I won't have to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess then as an alternative, Senator Quirmbach, you're saying that they're being unreasonable by not wanting to vote on your bill immediately.
I'm trying not to engage in name calling. I just want to motivate everybody to do the responsible thing.
And so why don't you folks hurry up and get the education reform done so that they're comfortable in acting on allowable growth?
The education reform bill that the governor has submitted is about 60 pages long. The allowable growth is one sentence. There's one thing we can do fairly quickly. The other thing will take some time and deserves careful consideration. The governors and the task forces have put months and months of effort into that. We had that education summit this last summer. We had an education summit the summer before. The task force reports that have come out this year are the result of directives that we put into last year's education reform bill. It's a long process. It deserves careful consideration. But like I say, you got to keep the lights on the schools. You got to buy the pencils, order the textbooks, put gas in the school bus, and pay the teachers. We need to keep our schools going, even as we look forward to improve them in the future.
And many of the things in the reform bill won't even go into effect in 2014. I mean, it's like you said, a 5-year program. So, it takes thoughtful consideration. I don't want to send anything to school districts that's going to be an unfunded mandate. I want to make sure we have everything in place the way it works for schools.
And I would point out, I don't want to get into a lockup and confrontation here. There are several different steps along the way here. We need allowable growth for 2013-14. We need the education reform. We need allowable growth for 2014-15. So I'm hoping that we can move forward in parallel tracks in ways that will build confidence in both sides. I think that everybody here, the legislature, Democrats, Republicans, and the governor, we're all committed to the same ultimate goal, which is a high-quality education for our kids.
Thank you very much for coming.